Imagine standing on the deck of the world's most luxurious ship as it tilts beneath your feet. You hear a sound like a million dishes crashing at once as 60-ton funnels the size of city buildings collapse into the sea. You watch hundreds of people swept away by a massive wave, sucked into the ship's hollow insides. This was the reality witnessed by Colonel Archibald Gracie on April 15th, 1912, the night Titanic sank, and what he saw was more violent, chaotic, and horrifying than any movie could ever show you. His book remains the most detailed survivor account ever written, and today I'm going to take you through his story minute by terrifying minute. After years of intense research, he decided to reward himself with a European vacation. Upon his return to America in April 1912, he boarded the RMS Titanic in Southampton for its maiden voyage to New York. Traveling first class, his cabin was C-51. He wrote to a friend, "It is a fine ship, but I shall await my journey's end before I pass judgment." He had no idea he'd become one of the last men pulled from the freezing Atlantic, and one of the few to document what actually happened in those final catastrophic moments. On the night of April 14th, Gracie had just gone to bed when he felt a faint jar. Nothing violent, just a slight shudder beneath the ship. He got up, walked into the corridor, and saw nothing unusual. No panic, no alarms, just quiet. But down in the hull, 6 compartments had been ripped open by the iceberg. The grandest ship ever built was now bleeding seawater at an unstoppable rate. At first, passengers treated it like a curiosity. Some even played with chunks of ice on the deck. By midnight, Captain Smith had ordered lifeboats to be uncovered. The Titanic, the unsinkable ship, was going down. There were over 2,200 people on board, but only 20 lifeboats. Enough space for only half. For the next 90 minutes, Gracie became a hero. He worked tirelessly alongside crew members, helping women and children into the lifeboats. He stayed near the starboard side, assisting first-class passengers like Mrs. Isidore Strauss. But even in those early moments, he witnessed disturbing scenes. Officers fired revolvers into the air, warning shots to prevent men from rushing the boats. Gracie saw stewards physically blocking passengers, shouting "women and children only." One officer reportedly threatened to shoot any man who put his foot into the boat like a dog. Panic was building. Order was fracturing. By 1:30 a.m., the bow was underwater. The ship's forward decks were submerged. The stern began to rise. Gracie moved towards the back of the ship with hundreds of others, now desperate to find safety. At 2:05 a.m., Gracie witnessed something that would haunt him forever. He encountered what he called a mass of humanity several lines deep, a wall of terrified passengers blocking the entire deck. Men, women, children, all packed together, paralyzed by fear. As the bow fully submerged, a giant wave broke over the boat deck, sweeping passengers off their feet. Gracie leapt onto the roof of the officers' quarters to avoid being dragged under. He watched as dozens of people were washed towards the grand staircase, sucked into its open shaft like water down a drain. He later wrote, "I was in a whirlpool of water, swirling round and around, as I still tried to cling to the railing as the ship plunged to the depths below." Gracie went down with the ship. He felt immense pressure in his ears as the water dragged him deeper. He held his breath, kicked with everything he had, and somehow broke the surface. When he came up, gasping for air, he saw the horror all around him. The forward funnel, weighing 60 tons, collapsed and fell into the ocean, crushing dozens of people before him and landing just inches away from an overturned lifeboat. He heard what he described as a terrific noise, like millions of dishes crashing or big guns firing. It was the boilers and engines breaking loose inside the ship, smashing through bulkheads as Titanic's stern rose higher and higher, and then came the scream. screams, the agonizing cries of death from over 1,000 throats, the wails and groaning of the suffering, the shrieks of the terror-stricken, the awful gaspings for breath of those in their last throes of drowning. Gracie said none of the survivors would ever forget the sound for the rest of their lives. Jack Thayer, a 17-year-old first-class passenger, watched from the water as the stern reared into the air until it was almost vertical before the ship broke apart. He described hearing 2 muffled explosions as the boilers burst inside the ship. He later made sketches aboard the rescue ship Carpathia, showing the ship splitting in 2 sections, the bow sinking first, then the stern rising nearly perpendicular before plunging down. Second Officer Charles Lightoller, the second highest ranking crew member to survive, testified that he saw the ship reach an absolute perpendicular position before slowly disappearing beneath the waves. Charlotte Collier, a second-class passenger in a lifeboat, witnessed the final moments from a distance. She wrote, "Something in the very bowels of Titanic exploded, and millions of sparks shot up into the sky. The stern stood absolutely straight on end before lowering into the water." She described the scene as people were screaming, yelling, crying for help all around her in the dark water. Ava Hart, just 7 years old at the time, was in a lifeboat with her mother when the ship went down. Decades later, she recalled with crystal clarity, "I saw that ship sink, and I saw that ship break in half." She described the most unbearable part. "The worst thing I can remember are the screams, the cries for help. It was awful." Her testimony was dismissed for decades until the wreck was discovered in 1985, proving she had been right all along. Gracie managed to swim to an overturned Collapsible B. It was upside down, barely floating, and with about 30 men clinging to its keel. Among them was Second Officer Charles Lightoller. For hours, they stood on that overturned lifeboat after the ship went down, balancing in the freezing water, which was cold enough to kill in minutes. Gracie described sitting on a perfectly stiff body, frozen in rigor mortis. All around them floated corpses. Gracie saw a group of 3 bodies with heads in the water, face downwards. He saw another man calling for help among the wreckage, but it was too late to reach him. He later wrote, "What impressed me at the time was a thin, light grey smoky vapour that hung like a pall over the water. At dawn, survivors were transferred to other lifeboats, and by 9 a.m, Gracie was finally pulled aboard the rescue ship Carpathia, one of 713 survivors out of over 2,200 souls. More than 1,500 people died that night. Archibald Gracie survived, but barely. He suffered severe hypothermia, crushed ribs, and lung damage. He spent the next 8 months obsessively writing the truth about the Titanic, interviewing survivors, compiling testimonies, and reliving the nightmare over and over. His final words, whispered on his deathbed on December 4th, 1912, were, "We must get them into the boats. We must get them all into the boats." He never recovered. The sinking of Titanic killed him just 8 months later than everybody else. His book remains the most comprehensive eyewitness account of the disaster ever written, and it reveals a truth Hollywood has never fully captured. The sinking of Titanic wasn't just tragic, it was violent, chaotic, terrifying, a nightmare of collapsing steel, freezing water, and 1,000 voices screaming into the dark.